Hello and welcome to the brewery. Yesterday I kegged the Saison from the last video, which is now in the kegerator, getting carbonated, and today it's time to brew again. Today we're going to be brewing a slightly modified version of one of the famous brewing recipes. I think I've probably brewed this on video before, so this is another version of Janet's Brown Ale, which went down really well last time. So today I'm going to be talking about American Brown Ale and tweaking recipes. So I'll be adjusting this relatively famous Brown Ale recipe from Tasting What's Old in America very slightly, just depending on what I've got and what I can get hold of here. So time to get going, and the HLT is heating up. The control system is booted up and ready to go with the fermentation profile on it. The grain is still in its bag, so that needs to go into place. Mash tun needs to be set up, and the water treatment prepped, but very much ready to go. I will talk again shortly. Hello, and we're back again. This time I just wanted to talk a little bit about the recipe for Janet's Brown and what I've done to change it, particularly in the malt bill that's just gone into the mash tun. The Janet's Brown recipe calls for dextrin malt and 40 Lovibond crystal, neither of which I had easily available, so obviously I had to tweak that somewhat. So instead of those two, I've stuck in Caragold and Caramalt at 12 and about 30 EBC each. Lovibond to EBC is about 2-to-1, so they're about right, in the right sort of reason. Also, it calls for some American chocolate malt at about 350 Love, so about 700-ish EBC. Doesn't match any of the UK malts particularly, so I've gone with some pale chocolate, which is about right in the 500s, and added about 20 to 30 grams of normal chocolate, just to add another dimension and bring the colour down a bit. Hopefully that all works out. We shall soon see. Hello and welcome back. Now, I'm making a few other tweaks to this recipe, mostly once again due to things I don't have. In this case for the hops. The recipe calls for Northern Brewer as a bittering and a 30-minute addition, and I haven't got any Northern Brewer and couldn't get hold of any, so I am planning to use some Magnum for the bittering, and probably this Styrian Wolf I have left over from a homebrew challenge for the flavour. It's not that far off, I think it will do the job. For the aroma hops, the recipe calls for Cascade, so I have some Cascade. Nice and easy, classic American, should go quite well. I primarily use pellets in my brew because I find they're easier to use and the lower volume is much easier to control. For the dry hop, the recipe calls for Centennial. I've got Centennial, but I've got Centennial BBC, so Boston Beer Company's version of it, which should be quite interesting and give us a boost more flavour and aroma. There are a lot of recipes for beer, although you can get from many places, from books, from the internet, from all over the place. The obvious books at the moment are Andy from Elusive's new camera one, which looks very good, and Gordon Strong has quite a new one as well, which is also very useful. But with a lot of these recipes you find wherever, you won't be able to get hold of all the ingredients, or you might want to make a change of your own. Now, changing things and personalising a recipe is a really good thing to do. It's a good step between going from exactly a recipe or a kit you've bought off a supplier, maybe an all-grain kit, to formulating your own recipes. And with a lot of recipes, especially those from America, you won't be able to get all of the ingredients necessarily that are listed in it exactly. So a lot of American recipes, for example, will list American 2-row or even American 6-row as a base malt, neither of which are easily available in the UK. You could swap out something like Maris Otter your classic British homebrewers malt instead, but it's quite a different malt. It has a much bigger flavour than the American malts. So what I tend to do is use something with a little less, still more, but a little less flavour, something like Propino or Golden Promise. For the crystal or caramel malts, it's your next stage. These in American recipes tend to come in 10 Loverbond steps. Now, Loverbond are about half of the European EBC colour measurement. So 20 Loverbond is about 40 EBC. About. You can get calculated out exactly. So what you need to do with UK crystals, which you can usually get in light, crystal, and dark, maybe even extra dark, is to try and match the closest colour you can. You can even blend a combination of, say, light and normal crystal to get approximately the right colour. You're never going to hit exactly the same flavour, but you'll get close enough. For the really dark malts, the roasted malts, you really need to start looking at the colour values, because these can vary quite a lot. Even with the crystals, the light and medium from different maltsters can have very different values. But with the roasted malts, these can be very, very different. So you're trying to hit the colour that is there in the recipe. Don't swap out one type of dark malt for another. They are all quite different. So don't swap out roasted barley for chocolate. You'll end up with a very different beer, unless that's what you want to do. For the hops, it's much the same again. It's really up to you. You can choose what you want to do and what you want to use. For the bittering hops, you usually swap out anything for a clean bittering hop, like Magnum, like I mentioned earlier, or perhaps a CTZ hop, though they're less available in the UK. For the flavour and aroma hops, you tend to be looking for something, well, the mid-boil and the late boil, they both give flavour and both give aroma. You're looking for something similar, unless obviously you want to change the recipe to one more of your own. So swapping Cascade for Centennial or Galaxy for another tropical one would be fine. But just think about what the flavours are. For early in the boil, the amount is always you're trying to match the IBU level. Later on, try and match the IBU level, but try and stay close on the actual number of grams. And then later in the boil, and in particular for dry hops, it's the number of grams that matter, not the IBU. And finally, yeast. Well, this is where the fun starts. A lot of recipes call for liquid yeasts. Maybe you don't have the ability to handle them or can't afford them. So swapping out the dried yeast is fairly easy. A lot of cases there is a direct substitution. There is a lot more dry yeast available now, both for various styles of beer. It used to be you could only basically get English bitter and USO5, but now you can get lager yeasts, saison yeasts, abbey yeast, all the rest is dry yeasts. You're trying to look for a similar flavour profile. There are websites for the liquid yeast that will tell you which brewer they're believed to have come from. Whether these are accurate or not is up to you. It's usually considered close enough, but try and swap for something the similar flavour profile, unless you really want to change things up, which of course you're allowed to. You could swap out the yeast in something like this American Brown for, say, a saison yeast. That would work. Be a bit odd, but it'll work. I'm not sure that spicy and lots of hops work very well together, but you could. You could put in an Abbey Ale yeast. That would work. Probably end up a bit sweeter. I don't know. Be interesting to try. In this case, what I'm planning to use is USO5. Dry yeast, nice and easy. Classic from America. Okay, now I'm going to talk about another type of a recipe adjustment that I just did. This recipe calls for a mash hop, and I completely forgot about it. So, well, I chucked a few hop cones in at the end of the mash, but that won't make much difference. And then went back to the recipe, recalculated the bitterness required, so altered the bittering addition of Magnum to make up for it. I'm not convinced that a mash hop actually does a huge amount, apart from get some isoalpha acids in there early on, though they're not really very soluble at that temperature. So we'll see what happens, and hopefully it'll all work. But that's the other way to adjust recipes, by mistake. welcome back to the end of the brew day. Lesson number one is don't try to do too much at once. As you may have seen in some of the high speed stuff, I was doing some work on the bike at the same time, and this got quite complicated with mash additions and changing bits and pieces. But I think everything's got done, everything's under control. The works in the fermenter, aerating away from the little aquarium pump to try and stop it from stalling. The mash tun is full of the hot water from cooling, ready to give it a good wash. Everything needs cleaning, so everything's at temperature. I think we're all good to go. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you for another brew day or beer related thing in the near future.